Improving your hunting property is always a good thing. You are taking things into your own hands to provide quality habitat and hunting opportunities. But not all improvements are created equal. And if you do it blindly, you could end up doing more harm than good. Good quality habitat improvements takes a lot of forethought and a lot of planning. And you know me, if you've watched even just a couple videos on this channel, you know I like to focus on the mistakes. It is the best way to learn what not to do. So in this video, we're going to go over 5 habitat improvement mistakes for you to avoid. And trust me, I have made every single one of them. But before we get into it, if this is your first time seeing one of my videos or on this channel, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button and make sure you hit that bell icon so you can be notified every time I upload a video. And the first habitat improvement mistake is you are overusing hinge cuts. The idea of hinge cuts is actually pretty cool. It is an extremely versatile tool, but more often than not, you just find that it's way overused. People use hinge cuts for a ton of different things. You can use it to make trails, you can use it to guide deer down certain paths, and you can use it to block the neighbor's view of your property. But if you find that you're using hinge cuts everywhere, you've got hinge cuts here for trails, here for bedding area, here, just everywhere, your property becomes just a giant mess of tangled hinge cut trees. Hinge cut projects need to be very well thought out before you cut that first tree. I mean, you got to think even down to what direction you want that tree to fall. So before you go out and cut, really think that stuff through. If you cut the wrong tree, even if you cut it right, it's going to be a long time before you get that tree back. The biggest tip to hinge cutting projects, other than safety tips, is that you need to be 1000% sure that you are cutting the right tree. And the second habitat improvement mistake is that you underestimate the power of native browse. The vast majority of a deer's diet is made up of native browse. It doesn't matter how many food plots you put in, that fact will always remain the same. You need to think of food plots as the dessert, as the areas to congregate deer to provide you with good hunting opportunities. I guarantee if you concentrate on providing quality native browse, your deer and turkey populations on your property will just explode. You can do this through strategic thinning and or prescribed fire. Just make sure that you have the proper training. And the third habitat improvement mistake is that you didn't focus on the limited factor. All the food plots in the world don't matter if you have absolutely zero water on your property. And the same goes for bedding areas. If they don't have a quality, safe place to sleep, they're just going to go to other properties where they can find it. Everyone thinks of food plots as the first habitat project to implement, but that may not always be what your property desperately needs. Study your property and identify what it's lacking the most. Once you bring things into more of a balance, then you can start improving things that are already there. And the fourth habitat improvement mistake is that you don't have a goal in mind for whatever specific project you want to complete. Have you ever stopped to think about why you're planting a food plot where you are, or why you want to put a water hole in this specific spot? Each habitat improvement project that you start needs to have a specific purpose. Whether you're putting a trail in and out of your tree stand to hide your movement, or you're putting a food plot adjacent to a bedding area, or whatever it is you're doing, you need to know why you're doing it and why you're doing it right there. Now think back to hinge cutting. How you cut that tree and where you cut that tree largely depends on what you want that hinge cut to do. If you're trying to block your neighbor's view of your property, you shouldn't cut that tree at waist level or below. It would actually do nothing other than actually probably improve their view into your property. So you really need to think about these things before you even start this project. And that brings us to the fifth habitat improvement mistake, and that is you did not consider the big picture. The individual projects that you complete are like chapters in a book. And if you are missing chapters, or if they're in the wrong order, then it makes for a terrible story. That was probably a horrible analogy, but hopefully you get the idea. Each project you complete affects all of the projects you have done or have yet to do. Let's say it's a brand new piece of property and you put in just one food plot, just one little piece of improvement. Now that will affect how that deer travel from one place to another all over the property. Now let's say then you turn around and you put in a new bedding area. You try to improve a specific spot for more bedding, and then that whole pattern shifts again. Hopefully you had the big picture in mind when you put the food plot in, or you put the bedding area in, because if you didn't, you could just be changing the patterns all the time, and you'll never be able to get a handle on how to best hunt that property. You have to make sure that all the individual projects you do or you plan to do fit together in a way that improves the hunting for you. You don't want to change the patterns as much as you want to make them more defined. Hopefully that makes sense. I guess a better analogy would be, let's say you put in a food plot in a specific spot because you're almost 100% sure that deer are bedding in this adjacent south-facing hill slope. Now, instead of putting another bedding area somewhere else where they might bed, you should probably improve the area that you can already identify as bedding. So that was 5 big habitat improvement mistakes. If you have any more habitat improvement mistakes you would like to share, leave those down in the comments below. Hit that like button if you like this video, share it if you found it helpful, and make sure that you are subscribed so you can stay informed.